All right, we're diving deep into emotional intimacy today.
Buckle up.
You sent over this lecture, and
Okay.
we're going to unpack it. Go beyond that surface level relationship advice.
Right.
More brain chemistry stuff.
Exactly. We'll explore the science behind why emotional intimacy is so crucial, not just for relationship happiness, but potentially even for your health.
The lecture kicks off by calling emotional intimacy the unsung hero of relationships. It's not as flashy as, physical attraction,
Right.
but it's really the bedrock of a lasting connection.
It is.
Hmm.
It's about feeling safe to share your whole self, not just the good parts.
Mm-hmm.
This vulnerability is where true bonding happens.
The lecture uses this great analogy. Imagine having a friend who is super attractive,
Okay.
but you don't connect with them emotionally. You wouldn't really want to hang out, right?
Yeah.
Same with romantic relationships. Looks fake. Emotional intimacy deepens.
And that deepening is rooted in our biology. The lecture mentions oxytocin, the love hormone. It floods our system when we feel emotionally close. It literally makes us feel calmer, happier, more connected.
Interesting.
On the flip side, lack of emotional intimacy can trigger stress hormones.
So basically, emotional intimacy is like a superpower for both your relationship and your individual well-being.
Exactly. The lecture links emotional intimacy to less stress, better immunity, even a longer lifespan.
Wow. So the lecture establishes that emotional intimacy is crucial, but then it gets into the nitty-gritty of how to actually build this superpower.
Right?
The first step is active listening, really tuning into your partner's feelings, not just their words.
It's about creating that safe space for them to open up. And remember, vulnerability is a two-way street.
Mm.
The lecture emphasizes sharing your fears and insecurities too.
Mm-hmm. This doesn't mean dumping all your baggage on your partner,
Right.
but just being authentically you.
The lecture highlights that it's not about grand gestures, but consistent effort. Small, everyday acts of connection build up over time.
So it's the little things that matter. But this all makes me wonder, what are some of the things that can sabotage our efforts to build this emotional intimacy?
That's a great question. The lecture actually dives into some potential pitfalls that we all need to be aware of.
All right, so we established that emotional intimacy is like this key ingredient for a happy, healthy relationship.
Right.
But like you were saying, there are these potential pitfalls that can kind of get in the way.
There are.
What are some of those intimacy busters?
Well, one of the biggest is the fear of vulnerability.
Oh, yeah.
It makes sense, right?
Yeah.
Opening up and letting someone truly see us can feel incredibly risky.
Totally. We worry about being judged or rejected. And so we build up these walls to protect ourselves, but then we end up blocking the very connection that we crave.
Right. And it's not just about our own fears. Sometimes we have past experiences, maybe in previous relationships, where our vulnerability was met with criticism
Oh, yeah.
or dismissal. And that can make it even harder to open up again.
Absolutely. So how do we overcome that fear and allow ourselves to be truly vulnerable with our partners?
Well, the lecture suggests starting small. It doesn't have to be this huge, dramatic reveal of your deepest, darkest secrets. Just start by sharing something relatively low risk, something you feel comfortable disclosing, and see how your partner responds.
So dip your toe in the water before you,
Exactly.
dive in head first. But what if you do open up and your partner doesn't respond the way that you'd hoped?
Yeah.
What if they shut down or get defensive?
Well, that's where communication comes in. And this is another potential pitfall that the lecture highlights. Communication breakdowns.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not just about those big blowout arguments.
Right.
It's those subtle, everyday ways that we disconnect from each other.
Yeah, like interrupting each other or not really listening.
Yeah, getting
Or
defensive.
zoning out.
And all of those things can really erode the foundation of emotional intimacy.
It's like death by 1,000 paper cuts.
Exactly. The lecture emphasizes the importance of being mindful of our communication patterns.
Okay.
Are we truly present when our partner is speaking? Are we actively listening and not just waiting for our turn to talk?
I love that image of being present because it's so easy to get distracted by your own thoughts or your to-do list or a notification.
On your phone. And that brings us to another potential intimacy buster. Technology.
Right.
We live in this world of constant connection,
Right.
but it's ironically leading to more disconnection in our personal relationships.
It's so true. How many times have you been out to dinner with someone and everyone's on their phone?
Oh, all the time.
Instead of actually talking to each other, or you're trying to have a conversation with your partner and they're scrolling through social media, it's like, hello.
Yeah, it sends the message that whatever's happening on that screen is more important than the person right in front of you.
It's exactly.
The lecture really encourages us to be more mindful of our technology use,
Mm-hmm.
to create these tech-free zones,
Yeah.
whether it's during meal times, in the bedroom,
Yeah.
even just for an hour each evening.
I think that's such an important point. We have to prioritize those face-to-face connections, those moments where we can actually be present with each other without the distractions of
Yeah.
the digital world. But what about when conflicts do arise? Because the lecture mentions unresolved conflict
Yes.
as another big intimacy killer, right?
Yeah, sweeping things under the rug might seem easier in the moment, but those unresolved issues can really fester and create resentment,
Right.
and that ultimately leads to emotional distance.
It's like that saying, holding on to anger is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die.
It is. It
Yeah.
hurts us more than it hurts them. The lecture emphasizes the importance of addressing conflicts in a healthy and constructive way.
Right.
And that starts with being able to communicate our needs and feelings assertively, but also with empathy and respect for our partner's perspective.
So it's not about avoiding conflict altogether, but like learning how to navigate it effectively.
Exactly.
And that requires emotional intelligence and self-awareness and a willingness to compromise.
It does. And it's also about picking your battles. Not every disagreement needs to turn into a major showdown.
Right.
Sometimes it's okay to let things go, to agree to disagree, and focus on that bigger picture of the relationship.
It makes so much sense, but it also sounds like hard work. Building and maintaining emotional intimacy requires constant effort and attention.
It does. But, like any worthwhile pursuit, it's a journey, not a destination.
Mm-hmm.
And the rewards, as we discussed, are immense.
So we talked about those major intimacy busters. Fear of vulnerability, communication breakdowns, technology overuse, and unresolved conflict. But the lecture also gives us some practical tips on how to actually cultivate emotional intimacy.
It does. And some of them might seem surprisingly simple,
Okay.
but they can make a world of difference.
So we talked about the intimacy busters, those sneaky things that can sabotage our relationships.
Right.
Now let's flip the script. Let's dig into the practical stuff.
Hmm.
What does the lecture suggest for actually building emotional intimacy?
Well, one of the simplest yet most powerful tips is to make time for quality time. And I don't mean just sitting on the couch watching TV together.
Right.
It's about carving out dedicated time for focused connection, whether it's a date night or a walk in the park, or even just 15 minutes of uninterrupted conversation before bed.
It is so easy to let life get in the way,
It is.
Get caught up in work, chores, all the busyness. We forget to nurture our relationship.
Exactly. And it doesn't have to be elaborate or expensive.
Yeah.
The key is to create those moments where you can truly tune into each other,
Yeah.
to put aside distractions and just be present.
The lecture also mentions the importance of expressing appreciation and affection. It seems so basic, but I bet a lot of couples take this for granted.
We do. We get so used to our partners that we forget to express gratitude for the little things they do. Making coffee in the morning,
Right.
picking up the dry cleaning, or just being there to listen after a tough day.
Those small gestures, I think, can really go a long way
They do.
in making our partners feel loved and appreciated. And it's not just about saying thank you. The lecture also talks about physical touch, right?
It does. And it's not just about sexual intimacy. It's about those everyday acts of physical affection,
Mm-hmm.
like holding hands, hugging, cuddling, or even just a quick kiss on the cheek. Those little touches can really strengthen the bond between partners.
That reminds me of something I read recently about touch starvation
Oh, interesting.
and how it can actually have these negative impacts on our mental and physical health. We're wired for connection,
We are.
and physical touch is such a fundamental part of that.
It is. And it's not just about receiving touch, it's also about giving it. Make an effort to initiate physical contact with your partner.
Yeah.
Whether it's a back rub after a long day or simply reaching for their hand while you're walking down the street.
It's the little things.
It is.
The lecture also highlights the importance of engaging in shared activities.
Yes.
Which makes sense, Doing things together creates that sense of togetherness, shared experiences.
It does. And it doesn't have to be some grand adventure. It could be as simple as cooking dinner together, trying a new hobby,
Right.
or even just working on a puzzle. The key is to find activities you both enjoy and that allow you to connect and have fun together.
It's so easy to fall into a routine in those long-term relationships. Do the same things day in and day out, Shaking things up a bit, trying new things, can inject some excitement, some novelty into the relationship.
It can. And it also gives you an opportunity to learn new things about each other and to create those shared memories.
So we've talked about making time for quality time, expressing appreciation and affection, physical touch, and engaging in shared activities. What other tips does the lecture give for cultivating emotional intimacy?
Well, one of the most important is to be supportive of your partner's dreams and goals. This means being their cheerleader,
Okay.
offering encouragement when they're feeling discouraged, and celebrating their successes.
It's about being there for them through thick and thin, right? Both in the big moments and in those everyday challenges.
Exactly. It's about showing them that you believe in them and that you're invested in their happiness and well-being.
And it's a two-way street, right?
It is.
We need to feel supported by our partners as well.
Absolutely. A healthy relationship is one where both partners feel safe and encouraged to pursue their passions and to grow as individuals.
This has been such a fascinating deep dive.
It has.
We've really explored the depths of emotional intimacy, from the science behind it to the practical ways we can cultivate it in our relationships.
It's been a pleasure unpacking these insights with you. Emotional intimacy is such a fundamental aspect of human connection,
Yeah.
and it's something we can all benefit from.
And it's not just about romantic relationships, right? It's about all the relationships in our lives. We can apply these principles to our friendships, our families,
Absolutely.
even our professional interactions.
Exactly. It's about cultivating that sense of closeness, trust, and understanding
Yeah.
with the people that matter to us.
Well, I think that's a beautiful note to end on. To our listener, I hope this deep dive has inspired you to prioritize emotional intimacy in your own life. It's a journey worth taking.